Are doing. 2-9 is all about percents. I'm going to give you the way I do the percent proportion. I will also give you the way the book does it, just so if you're referring back to it in the book, you can use it, because maybe some of you prefer it this way. I think my way is easier, personally. You don't have to use it, but I think it is. So if we are setting up a percent proportion, the way I set it up is this. I do percent over 100 equals is over of, okay? And that may not make any sense to you right now, but I will make it make sense to you in just a minute. Or if you want to do it the book way, which is not the way I will be talking about in class. So I highly recommend you do that first way. But the book way is this. They'll say A over B equals P over 100, okay? Here's what we're going to be doing. For the first example, the question will say something like this. What percent of 56 is 42? Okay, what percent of 56 is 42? Now, if you notice, there's three different things going on here, okay? It's what percent of 56 is 42, okay? If I take my percent over 100 equals is over of, and I plop some numbers in there, percent right now is what? No, it was kind of a trick question, and the way it worded was very funny. The percent is what, right? We don't know the percent. It says what percent. So that's our unknown. So we're just going to call that X, and then it's going to be over 100 equals, and then it's is over of. What would you guess is our is number? 42, right? That's the one that goes with the is. So 42 here. And what is our of number? 56, okay? As long as you can set up that proportion, you can figure out your percentages. What do you do to solve that? You cross multiply. So if we cross multiply this, I get 56x equals 42 times 100, which is 4,200. And then we're going to divide by 56. So 4,200 divided by 56 is 75. Okay, so here's the thing. I said what percent? What's my answer? 75 what? Percent, okay? When we're asking about the percent, make sure you label it as percent. So your answer would be 75%.
Can you write X to 75%?
Totally. Yep, that's great. All right, what about this one? What if I said what percent of 90 is 54? What percent of 90 is 54? So remember, it's percent over 100 equals is over of. Can you set that up for me? What's my X? What's my unknown right now? The percent again, okay? So right here in place of the percent is going to be my X. This one never changes. The 100 is always 100 because a percent is something divided by 100. If I say 75%, it's 75 over 100 or 0.75, okay? So the 100 never goes away. Percent over 100 equals what over what? 54, your is number, which is 54, over your of number, which is 90, and then you cross multiply it. So it's going to be 90 times X equals 54 times 100, so 5,400, and then you're going to divide by 90. So 5,400 divided by 90 is 60. What are we saying? 60 what? Percent. So make sure you label it. Okay. All right. That's one way you can set it up. Percent over 100 equals is over of. But you can also set it up as an equation. And I feel like typically when I'm doing percents, like in the store, if I'm trying to figure out what is 40% off of that shirt that I'm going to buy my son, I do it in more the equation route. So they're both totally applicable. They both work great. I'm just going to show you both options. So percent equation here is the other thing we're going to set it up as. And then we're just going to do a bunch of examples of both. So let's say I gave you the sentence, A is P percent of B. Okay? If I told you A is P percent of B. The way you can set it up as an equation is putting a variable or a symbol or an operation symbol in place of each thing that you see. So if I say A, that's going to be whatever A is. What is in math? Equals. And then P percent is going to be whatever P is as a percent. So you're going to write it as a decimal. But for now, we're just going to say P percent. Okay. What is of in math? Do you know? When you hear the word of in math, what are you actually doing? What operation? Multiplying. You're multiplying, right? So it's P percent times and then B. Okay, so we can write it as an equation and solve that way if we want. Here's what that would look like. Let's say I said, what percent of 40 is 2.5? Okay, so if I'm going to write it word for word, we got a few things going on here again. What percent, okay? What are we going to put in place of that? X, P, some variable, right? So if we call this X, what is of? 40. Sorry, of would be the 40 in the proportion, right? If we're writing it as an equation, of stands for, what'd you say, Liz? Multiplication. So X times 40, what's is in math? Equals, and then 2.5. Okay, so if I write an equation like this, X times 40 equals 2.5, how do I solve that equation? You get the X by itself. Right, to get the X by itself, we would have to divide by 40. So this is going to get rid of our 40, and 2.5 divided by 40 gives us this number. Now here's where the equation can give people a little bit more trouble. Okay, that's the number we get. What are we talking about? What was our unknown? A percent, okay? When you get a decimal like this, you have to turn it into a percent. So 0.0625, that's not the percent yet. Percent, I said, is always something divided by 100. So this has been divided by 100, which means we need to multiply by 100 to make it a percent. And multiplying by 100 always does the same thing. It moves your decimal point 2 places over to the right, okay? So when I get a decimal like that, we would say X is 6.25, and now you can put the percent sign behind it. So it's 6.25%. And then just ask yourself, does that make sense? 6.25% of 40. So 6% of 40 is 2.5. Well, 50% of 40 would be 20, right? So we know it's going to be less than 20. So just think through, like, what numbers seem to make sense with what we're talking about. Okay? Okay. I want to make sure we're not going to run out of time here. So let's try this one. Example 3. If I tell you a shirt costs $38.50 It's on sale for 30% off. What is the sale price? Okay. Where you have to be a little bit careful with this is how you're thinking about the problem. So a shirt costs $38.50. It's on sale for 30% off. What is the sale price of that shirt? So we don't want to know what 30% off is. We want to know what the new cost of the shirt is. So we can find 30% off, and then we would just have to subtract it from the cost of the shirt. Or there's different ways you could set it up. It's up to you, really, how you would prefer to set it up, I guess you would say. Does anyone have a preference? Do you want to try to set it up as an equation? Do you want to set it up as the percent over 100 equals is over of? Which one?
The percent over 100 equals is over of.
That one, percent, the first way I showed you. Okay, so if I said, basically the question you're asking here is what is 30% of 38.50? Okay, so now here's the thing. When it's asked like this, what is 30% of 38.50? And we have percent over 100 equals is over of. What is percent right now?
30.
30. Okay, so we have 30 over 100.
And then
What's is?
the variable.
The variable, okay, right? They're saying what is. We don't know what our is. So that's going to be your variable. And then of what?
38.50.
38.50. Okay, so we cross multiply that and we get 100x equals 38.50 times 30 is 1155. Okay, if I divide by 100, then x comes out to 1155. And we're talking dollars here, okay? Now here's the thing. We asked what's 30% of 38.50. And if that comes out to 1155, then how do I figure out my sale price? Is that my sale price? Is the shirt going to cost $11.55 now?
Subtract it.
You have to subtract it from the original price, right? We have to take 30% off of that. Well, this is 30%. So we're going to do 38.50 minus that 11.55, and that will tell us our sale price. So 38.50 minus 11.55 comes out to $26.95. So a shirt that originally cost $38.50, if it was 30% off, would now cost $26.95.
Does that only mean like you get a decimal if you use
The equation. If it's an equation, then you'll get the decimal percent. If you do the percent over 100 equals is over of, then you'll have your number as a percent already. Is that what you're asking me?
kind of like you know how you did the last problem and you divided.
Where I moved my decimal point?
Yeah, like do you do the same thing for if you was doing the first one, like the first
I don't know. I don't understand what you're asking me. Can I show you another problem and do it both ways, and then you see if you can tell me like with the numbers what we're talking about? Okay. Let's do this. Let's do this problem. 30% of what number is 12.5? Okay, so we'll set this one up both ways, and then hopefully you'll see the difference in what we're talking about with that. We'll see. Yeah.
So you know how you multiply the 100 by the decimal when you got the answer. and then you made it into, I don't know what you said. But what I saw when you did, you multiplied the decimal on example number 2.
I took my 0.0625 and I multiplied by 100.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
so
saying?
I was asking, do you do the same thing if you was doing it for the first one?
When you do percent over 100 equals is over of, you don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this one, 30% of what number is 12.5? So if we're gonna do percent over 100 equals is over of, what's gonna go here in our percent? 30, okay, so it's gonna be 30 over 100. What goes on top? 12.5 is 12.5, okay? And then of what number would go on bottom? So that's what? X, okay? And now you'll cross multiply it. So it's gonna be 30 times X equals 12.5 times 100. 1,250, right? Just moving your decimal point over essentially. So divide by 30. This is gone. We get X equals, 1250 divided by 30 is 41.6 repeating, or you could say 41 2/3. Either one of those would be fine. You don't need both, okay? Just pick one. So it's saying 30% of this number, 41.6 repeating, is 12.5, okay? If we were to set this up as an equation instead, now when you do the equation way, you have to turn your percent into a decimal. So Jada, this is where it needs to be a decimal instead of the percent. So 30% as a decimal is what number? 0.3, right? Yeah, so you would take that 30% and divide by 100 to turn it into a decimal. So 0.3, or you can call it 0.3, same thing. Of means times. What number is our variable? Is means equals, and then 12.5. So if you set it up, percent over 100 equals is over of, it's gonna look like that. If you set it up as an equation, it's gonna look like this. What you do to solve that then is divide by 0.3 and divide by 0.3. So this goes away and we get X equals, and then you just plug in 12.5 divided by 0.3 gives you that same number, 41.6 repeating. So I don't care if you do the equation way, like this, or if you do this way, you're gonna get the same answer. So it's more a matter of which one makes more sense to you, okay?
So you wouldn't care if we did all those problems like on the first way?
I might ask you, no, I don't. You could do either. I was gonna say I might ask you. In the past I've said like write the equation versus write the proportion, but I don't care. You could do either. That's fine. Okay, last question, and then we got to decide if we're taking a quiz tomorrow or not. Let's say a family sells a car to a dealership for 60% less than they paid for it. Okay, so they're selling it for 60% less than they paid. They paid $9,000 initially for the car, and I want to know, what did they sell it to the dealership for then? So we want to figure out 60% of 9,000 is what? Okay. If I set that up as an equation, what do I have to turn my 60% into? A decimal. It would be 0.6, right? Or 0.60, but you don't need the 0. What's of? Multiplication. And then 9,000, what's is? Equals. And then what? Okay? So if you type in 0.6 times 9,000, you get 5,400. Okay, the question was, if they originally bought the car for $9,000 and they sold it for 60% less, What did they get? You have to subtract it, right? So you have to go 9,000 minus 5,400, and you will get 3,600. So if they sold it for 60% less than they bought it for, they sold it for $3,600.
Wow.
Okay?
Car.
That's a bummer to not. Cars depreciate so fast. Okay,